This is our panel on opening access to works in the public domain at Yale University. My name is Melissa Fournier, the Yale Center for British Art, where I manage digital imaging and rights. John French from the Yale University Art Gallery, Director of Visual Resources, and Chris Edwards with the Beinecke Rare Books and Manuscripts Library, who's the Digital Production Manager. This panel basically cover how open access developed at Yale, how the policy was developed and rolled out. In the past few years, collaboration between collections departments at Yale has grown considerably, and one of the biggest fruits of those efforts is Yale's open access policy. So in this talk, I'd like to share how the policy developed at Yale, as well as some of the implications of the policy, including challenges. I'll also cover projects and opportunities for collaboration and dissemination that draw from and provide support to open access, including our online implementation at the Yale Center for British Art. John and Chris will provide examples of how the policy is or will be implemented through their services. I know John will focus more on the processes for managing open access, as well as work that we've done in our open access implementation working group. And Chris from the Beinecke will cover where their approach as a library differs from ours a bit. So what is Yale University's open access policy? In short, it provides license and royalty-free access to digital images of public domain materials in Yale collections. Open access materials may be used by anyone for any purpose. Yale's full open access policy contains important caveats about protecting works under copyright, rights of privacy and other restrictions, and use of the Yale trademark. However, one of the things about the Yale policy that sets it apart from previous efforts is that the Yale policy places no restriction on scope or use. Usage of Yale's digital representations of works in the public domain isn't limited just to scholarly purposes, nor is the policy restricted only to works that were digitized under a certain grant, or only a certain size of imagery production, or limit on print run, or only to library collections, or only to the university's museum collections. If material is believed to be unrestricted in the public domain, Yale places no restrictions on who or how anyone may use the material, including commercial use, and there are no longer any licensing requirements. The Yale Center for British Art, for example, no longer asserts copyright in its digital photography of its public domain collections. We now simply affirm the public domain status of our digital images in which we once asserted copyright. At launch, a policy this broad was unique amongst U.S. cultural heritage institutions. LACMA now has similarly without restrictions at all, and the National Gallery of Art announced their policy, and the NGA Images site launched in March 2012. So I'd like to explore some of the reasons, from my perspective, that the Yale open access policy developed the way that it did. For one, the art museums at Yale were eager to reduce barriers to their images long before the announcements of any formal policy. So the Yale Center for British Art, like many museums, had a sliding scale of photography and reproduction fees. We essentially charged fees for material and service. We didn't charge reproduction fees. And we waived them in almost every instance because most of our requests were scholarly in nature. And in the late 1990s, at the behest of our director, we cut any fees at all to a bare minimum. As we moved toward presenting our collections online in 2011, we benefited greatly toward the changing attitudes toward open access in the field, as well as from our work with Ken Hama, who's worked with the center and across Yale. Similarly, the Yale University Art Gallery maintained a sliding scale of material and permission fees, but began to provide educational and scholarly use free of any charge across the board in 2008. So in 2009, as both museums produced more and more digital imagery, we began to work on a lot of collaborative projects together to manage our digital assets, and the Art Gallery actually approached the center to discuss offering images for scholarly publication free of any charge at all, licensing, material, or service, and how we might accomplish that. And among the library collections at Yale, the Beinecke Library had a similarly demonstrated commitment to providing broad access to collections for teaching, learning, and research through its digital library, where it allows patrons to use materials in the public domain without its permission and to make fair use of copyrighted materials. So as we were contemplating all this, other movements were also afoot in the university more broadly. As all corners of the Yale campus crossed the digital divide, it was imperative that collections learn to share with each other in order to share with the world. And really, we've had a shift in the last few years at the university in the way in which we all work together. The museums and libraries at Yale now communicate and collaborate on projects in ways and with a regularity that was simply unimaginable to many of us several years ago. One of the organizations that helped facilitate this was the Office of Digital Assets and Infrastructure, which was created in 2008 following the recommendation of two high-level university task forces. Another factor, thinking back, some of you might remember a report that was issued by OCLC in late 2007. It addressed library-museum collaboration entitled Beyond the Silos of the Lambs, lambs being libraries, archives, and museums. So in October 2007, 16 representatives from libraries, archives, and museums around Yale gathered for a day-long meeting at the Beinecke Rare Book and Manuscript Library. This is facilitated by Gunter Weibel and Ricky Irway for RLG OCLC, and it was one of several meetings that were part of this study. The goal of the meeting was to identify collaborative and sustainable opportunities between our repositories. In our meeting, one of the recommendations that the participants reached was the need for the creation of a Yale Federation of Collections to help support a more strategic and cooperative approach across collection repositories at Yale. In the digital realm, the Office of Digital Assets and Infrastructure helped fill this need, bringing together committees and working groups working across museums and libraries at Yale to help find common technical and policy solutions. So ODAI projects include the Yale Digital Commons, or the YDC, shown here, which is a campus-wide collaboration to develop shared infrastructure for Yale's expansive digital asset collections. The YDC encompasses, among other projects, Yale's Media Manager, which is a shared digital asset management system, and the Discover Yale Digital Content Cross-Collection Search Service. A number of committees and working groups drawing from across the university also meet under ODAI's umbrella. So among those groups was the ODAI Advisory Committee. The members of this committee, which include the directors of the museums and libraries, bring together perspectives on digital content policy from across the university and recognize the role open access to images of cultural heritage material could and should play in the university's mission. In this environment, the open access policy began to develop into a university-wide initiative. The issue of open access was discussed extensively in the advisory committee with the provost, secretary, licensing VP and general counsel, the directors, CIO, and the director of Yale University Press. Perspectives were aired and consensus arrived at through several discussions and mediations, after which the idea of an open access policy was recommended to the officers of the university. Jock Reynolds, director of the Yale University Art Gallery, Amy Myers, director of the Yale Center for British Art, Derek Briggs, director of the Peabody Museum at Yale, Frank Turner, late director of the Yale University Library, and Meg Ballinger, director of ODAI, issued a joint memo in support of an open access policy in the fall of 2010, which led to the university-wide endorsement of an open access policy for digital representations of works in Yale collections in the public domain in 2011. The director's memo outlined 4 drivers for the adoption of a university-wide policy. So the first driver was the mission of the university. Yale's mission is to advance, disseminate, and preserve knowledge. We strive to educate leaders in the service of society. The directors noted that limiting access to the university's collection in the digital world would serve only to circumscribe the quality of research, education, and creative endeavors that are the core of the university's mission. The second driver was thought leadership. The directors recognized that the academic and cultural heritage communities were ready to embrace new policies and that Yale had an opportunity to be a leader in this effort. The third driver was financial consideration. The directors acknowledged that the cost of managing intellectual property, maintaining payment structures, and enforcing contractual restrictions almost always outweighs actual revenue. And finally, legal considerations. The directors acknowledged that digitizing public domain content may not in and of itself add enough unique creative value to warrant an attempt to copyright, that enforcing copyright is costly, and that attempts to restrict access to public domain cultural heritage material through licensing provisions may be neither legally enforceable nor ethically prudent. So at the outset, certain issues and challenges were recognized. An open access working group was formed and continues to meet in order to identify, address, and work through issues related to the interpretation and the implementation of the policy. Most of our issues boil down to this. For all our efforts to collaborate, Yale's campus and collections are vast and diverse. differences in practice are really as inevitable as differences in our resources and in our collection materials themselves. But while we may not all be singing the same notes, we need to follow the same score and we need to harmonize. One area where departmental practices may differ across the university relates to service charges. There are costs associated with fulfilling requests for new and original digitization. Yale's policy allows for us to charge, or allows for some units to charge for materials or service, so not fees for intellectual property rights. So those fees can be assessed according to the practice of the collecting unit. So having all but eliminated reproduction fees prior to the announcement of this policy, the Yale University Art Gallery and the Yale Center for British Art moved toward the elimination of as many other costs and administrative barriers as possible toward the use of our public domain images, including, in most cases, fees for new photography. Open access is part of our mission now, and we support it. We don't expect it to pay for itself financially. We hope and so far have found that it pays for itself in goodwill and in raising the use and the profiles of our collections. However, not all repositories at Yale have equal or adequate resources to support immediate digitization of materials that fall under the policy, or to immediately meet the demand that we found after we announced the policy. Some will simply have to charge for service or material in order to deliver. And even those that have adequate or even plentiful resources have vast collections under their care that are subject to priorities and constraints. And while it may be possible to provide access to material and place the full burden of rights determination on the user, for those repositories that wish to provide digital surrogates of open access material in the highest resolution possible, the importance of guidance in appropriately designated protected versus public domain material, and to understand protections and risks in those areas that aren't clearly defined, can't be overstated. So the advent of open access at Yale has made the development of better systems and services to distribute images both possible and a priority. One of the most exciting projects that went live this year, and that John will cover a bit more in his portion of the talk, is our content delivery service, which leverages the rights management capabilities of our media management system, along with the flexibility and speed and low cost of cloud services in order to quickly produce and deliver appropriate sized derivative images of our collection works to our websites or other gateways or access points for display or distribution. And here's just a brief illustration of what open access has meant in practice at the Yale Center for British Art. So we launched our searchable online collection in 2011, which was a little bit late in the game, but was in fact a really good thing because it allowed us to really consider this policy as we were building our architecture and interface and all of our interfaces. So we were able to really take full advantage of it. So with the launch of the policy, we had the ability to make the policy and technical decisions that allowed us to present unmitigated, transparent access to high-resolution images of our works in the public domain from the initial launch of our site. So for work in the public domain, images are made available for display and download on the web in a variety of sizes, from a 128 pixel square thumbnail up to a 25 megabyte TIFF file suitable for full-page reproduction. And there's a few screenshots up here of our download process, and it's really, we tried to place as few barriers as possible. We don't collect, although our site may log certain information, we don't collect any information from the user. We don't require you to register, log in, provide a password, tell us what you're going to use the image for. You can simply choose your image and download it. And then images of works under copyright remain protected. So some more challenges. Giving away things can be difficult, at least initially. One of the challenges we had was phasing out our licensing process and permission forms. And we actually found that many requesters required permission in a way. So we provided a way for people to download images, and then we had people come back to us and say, we really need you to sign this permission form for us. We can't just use it. We need your permission. And that was more common than you might think. Some changes that we made as well, in our own site, we initially allowed for works that we believe to be in the public domain, 6 different sizes of downloads, 3 sizes of JPEGs, and 3 TIFFs. And we found actually that we had quarter and half page TIFF sizes not used, so actually in the last couple of weeks we've eliminated those, and they're simply the largest full-size TIFF download. The other thing is we're working to make our site more clear and looking at our statistics and trying to figure out if those that visited our site and looked at images of public domain material, if they didn't download the material, why might that be? And so we're trying to be as clear as possible about what people can do with our material. So that concludes my portion, and I'm going to hand this over to John, who will provide more insight about the Yale University Art Gallery's approach, and then to Chris, and then we'll all be open for questions afterwards.
All right. Good morning. As I said, so I'm John French, Director of Visual Resources at the Yale Art Gallery, which is deals with the photography of the art collection, and then also the rights and reproductions end of things. And we also, in our group, manage the digital asset management system. So diving in just briefly, some of this is a quick glance over. So open access was announced in 2011. The Yale Art Gallery actually kind of had, in a way, its own form of open access that was started in 2008, where we waived all fees and provided, open access in the sense of unrestricted access to images in our collection. We did not have them in an online format, so we had no way for people to download these, but anybody that would come through our rights and reproductions office would be given the files for free. We still at that time had maintained the traditional contracts and signed and countersigned, but we weren't collecting any fees because we really looked and said, how much money are we making off of these primarily researchers who are already hard pressed to have money to use these images versus how much time and energy are we putting in, and the trade-off was not there. It was a cost to recovery, not ever even making profit off of it. So the decision by our curators and such was very easy, that in the very initial stages we said, let's make images available to scholars for free, and we'll still charge for commercial. But very quickly it started becoming these blurry lines of what really was commercial, what was scholarly, that we just said, let's just give it all away. We're not going to worry about this. But we didn't make any big hoopla or ta-da announcement about it. We just kind of quietly started saying there are no fees involved, in this transaction, and here's your image, thank you very much. Open access came about, and part of it started that, Melissa mentioned some of the things that led up to it on campus, but there was also a meeting in New York City by some of the main museum directors and people like myself, that support their directors in these initiatives, where Mellon grabbed people together to kind of see if they could start getting the ball rolling for this idea of open access, or at least making images available to scholars for free. And everybody, it was an interesting meeting to sit at because everybody around the table was all for it, but nobody wanted to dive in first. And the main reason that the director said they weren't quite ready to dive in first was that they needed to be able to convince their governing board that this was a good idea, that giving images away and not collecting money was a good thing. There were a couple of museums, notably, and I'm sure you could kind of think who they might be, who said, we would never do that. We would never give them away because we make too much money off of our images to ever go that route. But most people were interested in doing it, and because on campus, particularly the Yale Art Gallery and the Yale Center for British Art, were already thinking this way, they kind of came back from the meeting saying, we'll be the first ones to go this route and throw it out, and that's where some of these collaborations came on campus to really look at that. So open access does speak primarily to, well, it speaks exclusively to objects in the public domain. So objects that are under copyright, we still respect the idea of copyright and not just throwing them up on our website for people to download, but varying institutions are handling it differently. So at the Art Gallery, we're defining public domain as objects that were created prior to 1923. That's kind of an arbitrary line we've drawn because there are some objects that were created in 23, 22, but the artist died less than 70 years ago. So we can't necessarily always just say, here's our hard, fast line. We really have to look at different collections and make some determination about what they are. But collectively, this committee on campus, the Open Access Committee, kind of started looking to say, can we define some general terms of what public domain is not only for our own people on campus to use, but for us to point users to and say, here's what we're claiming public domain is, so that you have an idea. And on top of that, we knew that there were going to be a lot of questions coming up, and rather than each one of us writing a web page that said, here's the frequently asked questions about what public domain is, we worked together as a committee, and it was a long, arduous process, I think, to get down to the core of, what are some of the frequently asked questions about open access that we can point people to, and on our own website we can just point back to this so that there's one kind of central authority on campus working this way. So how do we at the Art Gallery deal with public domain works in this open access policy? We use TMS as our collections management system. The Yale Center for British Art does as well. The Beinecke uses a different system, which Chris can speak to. But obviously, TMS is the data authority about the object, and open access and copyright and public domain is about the object, not as much about the image of that object. So within TMS, we're using the rights and reproductions module, as it were, of that system to track this information. And so you can see in the screenshot here, this is a TMS record. This object was clearly created, prior, to 1923. It's in the public domain. So we've worked out a system, and part of it is automated, where we ran a query against the system and said anything that was created prior to 1923, go through and automatically tag that in this rights and reproductions module as public domain. And fill in some of these other fields that will eventually populate our media manager, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. This was a quick way for us to wholesale go through and gather up a bunch of images and say which things are public domain. The rest of them got marked as what we call not assigned. So for the Yale Art Gallery and Yale Center for British Art, it's fairly similar to this. We have these variety of categories of copyright restricted, copyright belongs to the art gallery if it was assigned to us, not assigned, status unclear. Usually we use status unclear if we're in the middle of researching an item, so that if somebody else in the gallery is looking at that same object and maybe starting to do research, they would see somebody's already underway doing that and talk to them. And then there's under copyright with varying levels of permissions that are involved, and we enter this information in. So we have one here. This is an object that's under copyright, so the object is marked as under copyright. We create a status flag in TMS so that it's visible on the main page, that there's some information you want to know about this object, so you're not having to go and open up the window to even see if there's something there. But we're tagging that it's under copyright, entering the date that we figured out that that object was under copyright. And then what we're doing is we're in the constituents module of TMS, we're entering in who the rights holder is for that with all the contact information recorded in there. The reason we're doing that is our past model was our publications department would keep spreadsheets on who the rights holder was to, say, the O'Keeffe objects, but if somebody else in another department wanted to use that image, they would end up going off and doing the same research to try to figure out who owns the rights and who's the person to contact and such like that. So part of this process of going through open access, we really had to start looking at how we're doing our business and creating more centralized models, not only for the gallery but for Yale. So we record this information within the system. The next step we go to is, identifying what would be in public domain and open access was relatively easy just on that simple date query. So we were able to identify that, mark up the record, and have it ready to go. What we're attempting to do as well is start contacting rights holders and living artists to say, we have this policy, we want to try to share images. To what level are you willing to buy into this program? Or at least what level are you willing to give the art gallery rights that if we want to put it up on our web page just to promote an exhibition, or we want to do a internal publication, are you willing to give us some blanket non-exclusive use permissions? So when we do that, we're recording that information again in the rights and reproductions section of TMS, and we're, like in this case, this is a Carrie James Marshall piece, we're entering that there's no restrictions, that we got an agreement for this particular object, and in this case a series of objects by Carrie James Marshall, where he said, if you're using this for art gallery purposes, have at it. You don't have to come knock on my door every time and ask. So what we've done in here is we've entered in that we have that permission. We put in the date that that permission was given, and then that ORT file name that you see there is an object rights type file name, and that's the physical document that we've scanned and made a PDF of and linked that document into our data system so that anybody that's going into the record and wants to know what permissions do we really have on this can literally, normally where you would click to enlarge the image in TMS, you click and download the PDF or open it in your window and be able to get that information there. How we're getting that information is we worked in a new process with our registrar's office that on the deed of gift forms that go out to every person who donates an object or each object that comes in, we also have built in a series of questions on intellectual property rights. So part of that question is, do you own the rights to this object, or do you know who owns the rights to this object? If you own them, we have a series of check boxes that say what permissions are you willing to give the gallery to use or none. And we have to weed through these deeds of gift fairly carefully because we'll often get somebody who owns a contemporary piece who says, oh, I own the rights to this object and you have my permission to do anything you want to do with this. And in reality, they don't own the rights to that object. They just happen to buy it and presume that because they bought it, that means they also have the permission to give permission to do anything they want. So we have to do a little bit of research when we get these to really look and say that, and sometimes contact back that person to say, well, do you have a document that clearly states that the artist gave you these permissions that you can now give to us? So it's a series of steps we've worked in, but again, it's helping us look at what we're doing. Another automation thing that we've built in that helps is, so we went through, when open access first came along, we went through and we scraped the whole TMS database and said, tell me everything today that is prior to 1923 so I can mark this as public domain. That was great, we had that data, but obviously as any museum, you're collecting on a regular basis. So new records are coming in and we needed to figure out a way of, without forcing every curatorial department to go in and populate fields and understand the rules that we had set up, we needed a way of notification to us that a new object had come in or something about an existing object had changed. So our IT department wrote some scripts that look at TMS on a nightly basis and say, tell me if a new record was created. And while you're doing that, look at the date field. And if the date field is prior to 1923, clearly identifiable, mark that record automatically in the rights screen as public domain. And if not, and you can't figure it out, just leave it as not assigned. But we then get this email tickler literally every morning that we can look at and say, here are these new objects. And sometimes the department enters the date range in as, we think this is 1800. Well, there's no way our IT department can write code against that, but it will display in the email. So we can look and say, oh, well, that's obviously public domain, or that's obviously under copyright, and go in and make some settings. Those drop downs that I showed you of public domain and under copyright and such are what are feeding information into our media manager, our DAM system, which then feeds something Melissa touched on called CDS, or Content Delivery Service. So Content Delivery Service looks at those settings of, are you under copyright, do we have these varying permissions, and pushes out a certain size of images to a separate database that then our websites or other people can look at. So this chart seems somewhat confusing at first, but basically those numbers you see on the left are representative of those terms I showed you earlier of no permissions or public domain or such, and shows you what size of images we as a group decided would be made available. And Melissa touched on that they were pushing quarter page, half page, full page TIFFs out to their websites. That's representative in here to say if you mark it a certain way, this automatically pushes through, so we don't have to look at that. And those numbers correlate here to some standard sizes that we all agreed we would push out. We made the decision as a group that we needed to define what a thumbnail was, because a lot of us wanted to be able to put copyrighted works out on our websites, but we knew we needed to respect copyright laws. And the art gallery, prior to doing this, and we're still in the last stages of updating our website, we're pushing upwards of 700 pixel images out of copyrighted material to our website. And we started having some agencies get in touch with us to say, that's not really fair use. You're putting a larger image out there than you should. So it led to a bigger discussion on campus of, can we define what a thumbnail is? AAMD had come out with their definition of a thumbnail, which was up to 250 by 300 pixels was a fair use thumbnail that they could do that. So we presented that to our legal counsel department and said, this is what our community says a thumbnail is. And they said, you have two different numbers here, and your definition says up to 250 by 300. So that meant that we, because of the advisement of legal counsel, had to basically say we have to take the smaller of those two numbers, because we all would love to know why AAMD decided to go with an odd number of 250 by 300 instead of just saying 300. But this is what they did. But their language also said up to, which did not mean up to and including a number, according to our legal department. So, so we had to go as a community on campus to say, we're going to go with 249. So copyrighted works that go up on our website will push out a 249 on the longest dimension website. And we have not heard from any organizations at this stage saying we think that's not fair use, so that's a good sign. All of that information that I mentioned there, the CDS access level and such, gets recorded in our DAM system, Digital Asset Management System. We on campus have a campus-wide DAM system that all of us are putting assets into, but in separate silos, so they're kind of security separated. And we're able to track information in there that is about the object and the rights to that, but even about the image and what images we want to have go out. And so you can see some of the fields here that the CDS access number is showing up. We can also put in rights information, so if we know that this is, the contact or the rights holder for this is the O'Keeffe Museum, we can put that in, so that when we push images out to our website, that information can display beneath the image. So in this particular case, here's a Diebenkorn object that's clearly under copyright. We don't have extended permissions with the foundation to push more than a thumbnail, so we're pushing the thumbnail. We're listing in, that the Diebenkorn Foundation is there, and we're providing a hyperlink that would point people to Diebenkorn, as well as to our own rights page saying, if you want a bigger image of this copyrighted thing, you can get in touch with Diebenkorn for permissions. You can get to us to get the object, but we can't provide it downloadable. For objects like this that are in the public domain, we're providing, on our new website, we're providing multiple views. This website should launch in the next week or so, I hope. We're providing multiple views, and then that you can download each of those assets. So the process the art gallery went through, and in partly looking at what the Yale Center for British Art had done with their online collection in advance of us, is we're providing a 20 megabyte TIFF file. So when you click to download, that's your one and only option. It just, that's what you're going to get. The thought was that most people would be able to deal with a 20 megabyte file. It wasn't that big to choke on. It provided up to a full-page scholarly publication reproduction, kind of following the art store model. So we felt like that was enough, but obviously if you wanted more, then you could get directly in touch with the Rights and Reproductions Office to say 20 megabytes isn't big enough. Or as Melissa said, even though we're giving these things away, particularly public domain, we still have a lot of people who come back and say, well, I still need a permissions letter because I can't just take this image to my publisher and have them do it. We need something to prove to do that. With that permissions letter, what we originally would do would still write in the person's name and the object they're asking for and all this detailed information that took a lot of time to fill out. That at the gallery we made the decision, and I believe this is what you're doing as well, that we've now just created a basic template letter that says, dear whoever you are, you've requested an image, here's our policy. We do attach, when they ask for it, a PDF of that document and then basic information about the object that has what our copyright credit line is and basic object information. That will send out if somebody's asking for a larger file, but the thought is that most people that want these are happy with what they're being delivered. So the next step that we're looking at, so open access has kind of created this great thing that we're giving things away, but obviously as you can see what we're talking through, it's creating a large workload for us to now look at how do we deal with and manage this. And it's an upfront workload that I think over time is going to diminish, but a new tool that we're building that will benefit the Yale Art Gallery and the Yale Center for British Art as well, because we're both on the same on the TMS system and using Media Manager, is we're getting a tool built that will allow us to kind of go in and look at new assets that have been ingested into our DAM and make some determinations of, in here, can I make sure that the content delivery service, that magical number of am I displaying nothing up to a full page TIFF, is correct? Can I enter in the rights information? We kind of have a visual record tool snapshot of here's an object and here are all the images associated with it, and here are the varying rights levels we want to push to that. So kind of just to wrap up a little bit about what's going on. So this open access is great. I mean, I really think, particularly because these objects are in the public domain, we should be making these available to people to do whatever they want to do. Kind of the Ken Hama gave a talk years ago at MCN in Pasadena about the rip, mix, burn idea of people should be able to take these, do what they want to do with them, and re-put them back out there. We're all for that, but obviously there's a lot of steps that have to go to in place to do that. So I would say one, open access from when we were giving stuff away for free, but we had not publicized that we were giving things away for free, to when open access was officially announced and there was a decent amount of press about it. In that 6-month period after that, we've seen an increase that continues to go on of about 40% increase in number of requests for objects. Most of those, for the art gallery, about 80% of those actually all are objects that are in the public domain. So open access didn't really necessarily push people to look at the commercial aspect of it. And the tracking that we've done, because we're just in the stages of delivering this online downloadability, we still get the requests that come in to our Rights and Reproductions office. The vast majority of them are people that are using them for research or scholarly permission. The fear that a lot of people have about open access, or a lot of museums have about it, is that people are going to take these and start doing these commercial projects with them, and they're going to be making posters and the God forbid, the shower curtain of our collection. We're not seeing that happen, and there was certain discussion even with our curators of, well, what's the harm if that really did happen? If our Van Gogh shows up on shower curtains, maybe that's a good thing, that every morning somebody's walking into their bathroom and the first thing they see is Yale's Van Gogh. So we've seen that the open access is actually bringing more attention to the gallery and getting more people to go. We get more people that get excited when you say, you're not charging us anything for this and we can go off and do it. But it has increased the workload, so it's forced us to have to look at ways to automate things to get these out the door quicker so that people aren't getting angry saying it's taking 6 weeks to get this. We've seen some increase in objects of people requesting images that have not been photographed. The art gallery has a policy that if you want an image photographed. We do that for free, so we don't charge any fees. There is a time restriction, so we're not guaranteeing that you're going to get that in the next 2 weeks, but we will work it into the queue, and as soon as it's there, it's out. And again, the thought of that is most of those people are doing some sort of scholarly work with that, so that's going to get into a publication that's going to bring greater recognition to the art gallery in a roundabout way. So it's providing a service in a way that we now kind of have an idea of where are people interested and focused in our collection that our curators might know. I know that Center has a better sense, you might speak to that a little, about knowing who their constituents are versus the art gallery, who has a broad-ranging collection that we can't really pinpoint, oh, we know who likes our collection and who uses it. I think you mentioned at one point you kind of know who your audience is.
We do have a more focused collection, so there, I guess that does lead to a little more focused audience, but it's broader with open access. I mean, sometimes you get surprised by who approaches you and what you see. And I think we're hoping too, you know, back in the days of traditional rights and reproductions, when we were handling requests from people individually, you know, by and large, it scholarly work. Graduate students and professors and people working in the field. And our hope is too that with open access that really like K through 12 educators, and we're really hoping that we'll get much more broad and diverse use of our collections.
Right. So just kind of wrap up a little bit and pass on to Chris, but open access is not, for the art gallery, prohibited us from still working with some other agency. So we, at the art gallery, we still work with Art Resource and Scala and the like. They are representing a group of our images, some of which are public domain images. And our feeling is that we didn't want to pull all of those back from those organizations and say, well, the art gallery is giving those away for free now, so we don't want you to handle them anymore, because we really felt like those companies provide a service, and a lot of people are often going not with a specific, I'm looking for this exact object, but I'm looking for this theme of, you know, gargoyles or something like that, that just happens to be in the art gallery collection. So the idea of open access is just about broader accessibility to collections. So for us, still maintaining those third-party relationships is a worthwhile thing. With CDS, we're still interested in companies like, you know, Art Store and the like, where we have some existing relationships, but other ones that are coming on of ArtNet and the like, that they could potentially just come in and basically have their database talk to the content delivery service and say, well, these are all the images that have been cleared and vetted and they're, you know, feel pretty safe to go. They can just come and, in essence, scrape out what they want to get from that without even having to talk to the Yale Center for British Art or the Yale Art Gallery, because they've gone through a vetting process already. So again, it's a way to make these things more accessible. I will pass on to Chris, who's going to talk a little bit more about the library end of things, which is a little bit different than us art folk. And then we can take whatever questions you might have at the end.
Thanks. Well, so my name is Chris Edwards. I'm the digital studio manager at the Beinecke Library. As has been referenced, we do things a little differently. As I'm sitting here listening to my colleagues talk, I'm struck by how different the cultures are, and that, you know, in the world of libraries, open access is not a really new idea. And so how we've reacted to it is somewhat different, although we're all, you know, moving towards the same direction. Just a little bit about who we are, the Beinecke Library. We've been around for 50 years. We are the rare book and manuscript library for Yale University. We are the largest collection of rare books and manuscripts in the Americas and one of the largest in the world. You know, I guess what I really want to talk about is how we have responded to this and really how we're delivering images, because a lot of the ideas behind what we're doing are essentially the same, but how we're doing it is a little bit different. And lastly, we've got a fairly large staff, about 100 full-time employees, and our studio is 3 full-time photographers. So we produce a lot of images. We've been producing images since 2002. We exist mainly to support the teaching mission of our institution. We produce images that support classrooms. We produce images that support our researchers, and we also support our own publications, of which we'll do maybe half a dozen to a dozen a year, depending on how aggressive our curators are or how aggressive our exhibitions are. We also undertook rapid imaging back in 2008, and we've produced about 209,000 rapid imaging images. And that's a complement to the 170,000-ish high-res TIFFs that we've made. So we really have a large collection of images. And back in 2011, open access was announced, and I know that the hows and the whys were covered by John and Melissa, but I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about what happened, because again, how we all approached it is a little bit different, because to some degree we had been doing this already. On our website we had directions on how to go to our website and right-click on our larger images and download them for your own purposes. And that seemed to suffice for an awful lot of people. But once this announcement was made, and ODAI began to create this large centralized dam, the Beinecke became a partner in the dam alongside the Art Gallery and the Yale Center for British Art. Unfortunately, after a period of time, it became clear that our needs were different than the needs of the galleries, and so the Beinecke and the main library system decided to part ways, and we broke off and have started to create our own system. Now, this is very much in flux. The main library and the main library's IT is creating, probably as we speak, a Fedora database, and they're using Blacklight for the presentation layer and Hydra for the delivery and all this stuff. So in the meantime, the Beinecke has come up with its own way of doing things, which is kind of how things tend to go at Yale. The Beinecke strikes off and does their own thing. You guys probably know nothing about that. But through all of this, we have a pretty clear and pretty comprehensive copyright policy. All of our non-restricted images, images that are not obviously under copyright or that we have not been specifically told do not use this image, do not display this image, can be viewed on our website. We have allowed for a very long time free downloading of the JPEGs that are on our site, and as I said, we had provided instructions on how to do this, and we also have a process that allows patrons to pay for high-resolution TIFFs, and again, we're not licensing them. It's just to pay for our operating costs, or at least has been to pay for our operating costs, and I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But we can't guarantee that our images are out of copyright, and we don't actually give licensing permission. What we do is we provide very detailed instructions on how you, as the end consumer, can get in touch with who might be the copyright holder and get clear copyright for your uses. We also give very clear instructions on how the Beinecke should be cited if you're going to use it in your website, in your publication, in your project. And that has really covered us. And then also we have a very quick takedown policy if there's a complaint. But really, to my mind, I can count on one hand the amount of times that we've been asked to take anything down. And of course, it's always at midnight. I'll get an email from a curator, and I have to remote desktop in and fire up SQL and take it down. But it's never been a real problem. to compensate, well, to take care of the things that we can't show, we have a tiered access policy. And again, despite our liberal copyright, there are things that we just simply can't show. In fact, maybe I shouldn't even be showing you these thumbnails. But what you're looking at are some Jean-Paul Basquiat notebooks that he had done when he was in high school, and it's some of the first examples of his SAMO tagging. So these are really important and really exciting documents, but we don't have the ability to show them. So what we have come up with was we have a 4-tiered system. And so there are images that are available to no one, not even us, we can't even see them. There are images that can be seen in the Beinecke library only, they're IP restricted. It's all IP restriction. There are images that can be seen only on Yale campus, and then there are images that can be seen by anybody, anywhere. And of our images to be seen by anybody, anywhere is the largest group. That's primarily what we have. And there are some that will, they're in the process of becoming less restricted. We are actively moving things from not being able to be seen by anybody anywhere to being able to be seen in the library or being able to be seen by everybody. It's sort of a process that's in flux. It rarely moves backwards, but it often moves forwards. And that's really what we're trying to do. We're trying to get everything out into the open because we're a library, and that's what you're supposed to do. That's part of our core mission, is to provide access to our holdings. As John touched on, we don't use TMS. We have a homegrown system. It's a metadata recording system. It's called Ladybird. And Ladybird actually is what holds most of the information about the rights for an object. It is what sets the tiered restriction and restriction access, and it's really what we're moving towards. It is being developed right now to be a Java application. It will be open source. We're hoping everybody uses it. In addition to holding the metadata, it actually also, we've built in a module for studio tracking so that you can use it for a shot list to know what your photographers need to photograph next. It's kind of what I care about. But it's a good system, and that's how we control everything. It now communicates directly with our website. So whereas at one time we used all the same tools that John and Melissa have described, when it was decided that we were going to go in our own direction, we had to very quickly modify the tools that we had in place already to achieve the same results. So when you can see an image, if you're browsing on our website and you find something that is viewable wherever you happen to be, this is what you get. You get your image and you get your metadata. Now, where it starts to get exciting and where we start to talk about delivery is that if you click on the image itself, it opens up our JPEG 2000 browser. And we use Kakadu for our JPEG 2000s. It's open source. And what the JPEG 2000 viewer allows us to do is it allows the images to stream. You can zoom, you can pan. But again, where it gets really cool is, as you see where the red arrow is, there's a link for download this image. And what that does is it downloads, it on the fly transcodes and downloads you a full resolution JPEG of the image. So for example, this particular image, if you clicked on the download this image link, you'd get a 6,000 by 4,000 pixel JPEG, which is huge. And we have some innovations that are going to be coming down the pike soon. We're going to be allowing for mass downloading anything. It's going to be call number based, where you'll be able to download, say, the entire run of these 1920s Western movie posters. If you simply want them all, you just say, download all. Now we're working on the infrastructure for that. It'll probably it takes a while to aggregate all of those. So one of the things we're talking about doing is, you'll input your email address and you'll actually get an email with a link when it's done, because it'll take like a half hour. And most notably, we're going to be allowing downloads of our full resolution TIFFs. And that's going to be about 6 to 9 months out. And we're actively working right now with our general counsel to figure out, where do we draw the line? Because we're very liberal with the images that we give away, but there is a line drawn with TIFFs, even if it's merely perceptual. So we're actively working on trying to figure out how to do that. And to sort of speak to the shower curtain conundrum, to our to what we've seen, we haven't seen any mouse pads come out yet. We haven't seen any shower curtains, but I suppose even if it did, it'd be okay. In our world, in the Beinecke, we hold this manuscript that's called the Voynich manuscript, and it's or the Voynich cipher manuscript, and it's got a phenomenal cult following. It's written in a language that no one understands, documenting plants that nobody knows what they are and animals that may not exist, and if it's true, holds the recipe to the elixir of life. And there is a full complement of very dedicated, mostly amateur scholars who are trying to figure this out all on their own. And there exist entire websites that tell you step by step how to download these images off of our website. People sell CDs and DVDs of what they've made of high-res images that have been pulled off our website, and they sell them on eBay. So it's going to be a gold rush once we start offering full downloads of those. But so much the better. This information is now out there, and that's really the name of the game. As I said, we do have TIFF for a fee. This is going to go away. But if you click on that link now, you get a pre-populated email. We sell our TIFFs for our reproductions and our new TIFFs for $15 a piece. I believe we'll continue to charge for new files to be generated, if only to prevent people from ordering 5,000. It's sort of, we work on the same idea as late fees at your general library. It's not so much that the library needs money, it's not so much that we need the money, but we just want to make it so that people don't go crazy and swamp us. And it pays for some of our time. We have never charged for licensing. I don't think we will ever charge for licensing. And likewise, I find it very interesting to hear that people are asking for letters to allow licensing, because that's nothing that we've ever had to deal with. Again, I'm struck by the difference of the cultures, the difference between the museums and the libraries. I think there is a perception, certainly in my institution, that this is our job, and there's a perception amongst our patrons that it's our job. And so it's just sort of taken that when they receive the images, they can use them. And it's worked out fairly well so far. Lastly, we don't just stop at sharing our images, we also share our source code. And we share our source code for just about everything. Because we make these programs ourselves and we do a lot of our own support, we have a GitHub account. And as we develop more tools for this process, they're all going to be posted up on there for free use. Anybody can grab them. Currently, at this moment, we have some scripts up there for our file conversions to take our TIFFs and make them JPEGs and JPEG 2000s. And again, we use only open source tools. So it's the whole thing. You can get the whole thing right there. We also have our carrier scripts, which take the images from a hot folder on my studio server, and then takes them out and puts them on all the different servers that they need to live in, so that they can be delivered to you, the end user. And then as we develop more tools, everything will end up here. And we certainly invite you guys to take anything that might be of use to you and your institution. Hopefully you can fix some stuff we don't like and give it back to us. So that's really about how we do things. And again, it's the spirit is the same, the intent is the same, but the methods in which we do it are a little different. I'm struck by how, I guess, less complicated the way the library is approaching it, which doesn't make it better. It's just a little different. And I think, again, it's the different in the cultures behind what we do. Because libraries are often seen, and in particular because we're a research library, our mission has always been to make this information freely available. The idea of open access was a very natural one for us. It wasn't a reach. We didn't have to, our institution didn't have to do any soul searching. It just was the next right thing to do. And so we've been able to embrace it really easily, and it's become a central part to what we do. This is all of our contact information. If you have any questions, certainly you can feel free to contact me, and I'm sure John and Melissa as well. And thank you very much for listening.
So if there's questions, we'll take some. But I mean, I do want to make at least a note, because I think, you know, it's easy to, I think a lot of times when we talk about open access and stuff, people look and say, well, yes, but you're Yale, you have tons of money, and so this is obviously an easy thing for you to do. I think this is very scalable to even small community type museums that really want to look at going this route of bringing more visibility to their collections. That's really what this is about. It's, you know, part of what potentially may be cumbersome about it for Yale is that, you know, we have so many units on campus that all have had their own way of doing things, that we were all trying to work together to say, how can we solve this in one common path? And it's never easy to get, you know, even 3 people in a room, let alone, you know, 6 institutions on a campus together to come to some agreements on commonalities. But I do think if, as a campus, we can do it, certainly other people could. And as Melissa stated early on, there are more institutions going this way that are bigger institutions heading down the path, because I think, you know, they were already thinking that way, but I think as they see more people doing it, there are more people getting excited about that idea of, you know, let's make this available. And frankly, it's almost this keeping up with the Joneses idea of, well, the National Gallery's doing it and Yale's doing it, and, you know, Met will probably be the next one doing it, so we better get on board too, because now they're governing boards who first they were fearful of being opposed to this are now going to start saying, why aren't we doing it? All these other people are doing it, why aren't we doing this stuff? So anyway, if there are questions about any specifics, we'd be happy to try to answer them.
Neil Summer from Asset Management. Are the scripts that you would have with your art department, are those available at all? Are they online on your website?
Right. I'm gonna repeat questions for the sake of video, just so we have that. So the question is, are the scripts available or any of that available? Absolutely. At least, I mean, across the board, most of us at Yale work in that environment of sharing our resource codes, sharing our information so that it's available. The Yale Art Gallery, basically everything I showed you there, particularly related to TMS, we don't have it posted up somewhere to just say, well, here it is, come get it, because frankly, we haven't taken the time to do that. But all it takes is, you know, an email or a call to us, and we will put you directly in touch with the person who will send you the line code and say, this obviously is scripted to the art gallery, but all you have to do is, you know, substitute different code and you're set to go. That's the other thing that we're about, is let's all work together to make this happen, not, you know, keep it secretive and want to try to, you know, sell it in some fashion. Yes?
My question is actually related to that. You know, I think we're in an interesting position. We have almost no rights issues at all. And for us, we're going forward with open access, and we have some infrastructure issues, like, you know, delivering high resolution tips, you know, online is like a big challenge for us because we just don't have the infrastructure. My question was 2-part. The content delivery service, you know, was that a big financial undertaking? Like, did you have to raise money to build it? And did you guys have to raise money to address some hardware and, you know, infrastructure issues, or was it more just like being creative with the tools that you had? Like, was it an expensive, you know, project or change in policy, I guess?
Well, I mean, the digital asset management system project overall was not cheap, but the content delivery service was developed by a senior programmer at ODAI, and you know, I think was not a huge or expensive project, and it utilizes Amazon S3, which is extremely reasonable. So, you know, I would encourage you to look into something like that. And
internally at the Beinecke, we're actually using rack space. I mean, I think what you're finding is that we're, as an institution, moving away from proprietary servers and building our own infrastructure and taking advantage of cloud-based services. And they're really not that expensive, and they do the job for you.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, all of this is scalable. So I think, you know, that's part of what you have to look at is, one, you know, wrapping around the idea of open access and making it available, and then looking to say what resources do you have and available. I mean, in the early days when we weren't really calling it open access, we were still providing these images, you know, for free. We were just doing it in our old methods of send us an email or a fax and we'll, you know, we got more fancy and we were suddenly able to FTP a file out, and that was great. The days before that, we would burn it onto a CD, put it in an envelope, and mail it out. And there were costs associated with that we made a determination we would just eat. But it was still a means of delivering. You know, technology is pushing ahead now, and so now we have CDS, so instead of having people tap directly into our DAM, which makes us nervous because there's things in there we don't want people to get to, we have this system that can just communicate between our DAM and this CDS to say, what stuff can I have? And then we can point other people to a common language that CDS speaks and say, have your servers talk to this. And anytime you want new stuff, just go back and get it, because that's the data authority, basically. That's the authority on images and data. And we're trying to use tools that already exist. So like the Amazon tools, it's already there. There's server space there. If somebody decides they want to download, you know, 600 images, well, then it fires up the servers on Amazon servers to allow that person to download them, and then it shuts them back down. So you get a floating scale of, you know, what that cost might be to us as a unit. Whether you wanted to pass that on to somebody, you could choose to do that. Yes?
I guess this is for the TMS. For the copyright, since it's sort of fluid with modern and contemporary, are you tracking the history of copyright? I know in the TMS on our rights and professions it's static, in a sense it's just as current. Are you guys also tracking the sort of genealogy of copyright holders?
We, at the Art Gallery, yeah, so the question was tracking on copyright, and I believe, you know, what steps are involved in that. So the Art Gallery, we are tracking, in essence, the genealogy of that. So particularly a lot of the contemporary artists who's work with a dealer or, you know, a gallery who represents them for a while, and rather than going to that artist, you're supposed to go to the Marlborough Gallery or something. When that artist then changes to somebody else, we keep track of that information in there, and again, it's all through TMS. It has it built in so that you can track what are the date ranges that this person was represented by this person and this person. You know, our end goal is to try to get a lot of these non-exclusive agreements. We have such a big collection that when I proposed to our director that we go through this, in essence, letter writing campaign to contact every rights holder and send them a non-exclusive letter and such, they said it's not worth the effort we're putting in. You know, to them it wasn't worth us going through that. So we're doing it through the deed of gifts now, and as we do research on a project, if we're already contacting them for rights for a particular publication we're doing, we'll at the same time basically slip the letter in there that says, while we have your attention, are you willing to do this? We don't get a high rate of return on those, admittedly, but we are getting some. I mean, personally I was excited to see that Kerry James Marshall, when he donated some works to us, happily signed an agreement saying, I'm giving you this permission on these, and any future works you get by me fall under the same envelope. Not every artist is checking that box to say, you know, they'll say, yeah, it's for this one, but, you know, I might get more famous down the road, so I don't, you know, I want to have some means of control over that. Others are happy that the images are getting out there because it just promotes their work.
But, I see your point about TMS being static, though, in terms of tracking. I mean, you can only have one object rights type. With TMS 2010 and the rights-related constituents, I mean, that sort of provides a way that if you add a new...
Is it connected to ranges for constituents?
You can have multiple rights constituents.
And you can
available.
actually put date ranges in there. And then, you know, at other points in time, I've used other ways to, you know, before that existed, I would have notes in constituent files about changes. But yeah, I think with that change in TMS 2010, you have a better way to do that.
Question. Since the announcement of open access at Yale and across the museums and libraries, has there been a push to identify and digitize public domain, you know, materials? Obviously, what's available is only what has been scanned and photographed and everything. Is there a push to sort of identify? I know most of the stuff that happens in your studios are probably as requested, or as, you know, curators are sort of putting together shows, but is there also a push to just get all of what you have?
And speaking
Right.
for the center, we're in the midst of an effort to get it. We've already done all of our paintings, and we're well on our way through prints and drawings with a goal for, I believe, 3 years to have finished that. And some parts of our collection will never be done, like our rare books and manuscripts. I mean, it will go on and on and on.
Yeah.
But I'll let John and
I think for us, it's dependent on collection by collection. Our Works on Paper collection, similarly, we went through a campaign and we did a rapid imaging project. So we went through and we captured every single object that we had, you know, in that collection that was, you know, in a Solander box, matted or loose, and digitized that. It was not at what we would necessarily consider the publication level, because the idea was we just went through and each day we would shoot and color match, you know, to a known target versus adjusting every file. But the idea was we were making the images available out there for discovery purposes. And then if somebody came and said, well, I want to publish that, we could look at that particular file and say, is that a good enough file for what we want, or do we need to reshoot it at a higher level? We've just started a project for all of our sketchbooks to go through and digitize all of those, literally every single page. And most of those happen to be in the public domain, but the main reason we're doing them was not because they're in the public domain, but because they're well sought after. There are a lot of the Lafarge travel journals and such. They're not easy, you know, they don't want to have researchers coming through and thumbing through them all the time. So it was a collection that made sense to do rapid imaging on. And then all of those images, because they happen to be public domain, will be available on the website, because we're allowing you to display more than one image, and therefore you'd be able to download them too. So it's, you know, a longer term benefit, but we're so publication driven that that's where our main focus is. And then, you know, if somebody's requesting it versus saying, let's go through and do everything that's public domain so that we can just get it out there and focus only on the copyrighted stuff.
In the libraries, because of our tiered access, we're not necessarily driven by copyright, but whether something is in or out of copyright is one of the factors in making a decision of whether something gets digitized or not. It won't be, if it's still in copyright, it's not the factor that will prevent it from being digitized. But you know, if there's an awful lot of, you know, strikes against it, then it's not going to. But conversely, if there's a lot of interest and it just happens to not be in copyright, or it happens to be in copyright, we'll still digitize it because we have ways of dealing with it, you know, after the fact. Even if it you know, simply can't be shown. You know, we have a couple of collections where the Beinecke Library will be a repository, because we're a safe, climate-controlled environment, for objects and collections that we are not allowed to use, we're not allowed to show, but we will be able to use them and show them after a certain set date. You know, we have a couple of really famous photographers, a couple of really famous illustrators, and we digitize a lot of their material, especially because these people are still actively selling the rights to their material, and part of the agreement between the Beinecke and the artist is that they get to sell the rights and sell the image, but we create the image for them, and that's part of, you know, that's part of how we get these collections. So, no, if we want to digitize it, we do.
Chris, a question for you. Have you thought about transcription as a way to make material that you can't make accessible under the tiers available to people, so that if they can't see the Basquiat's diary,
Right.
can they at least read a transcription of the text so that the text itself is available?
So the question was, are we thinking about transcribing or OCR?
You might still have issues of publicity and privacy.
Yeah. There may be, but also just OCR is a can of worms that my director has been avoiding for a while, and not unjustly. It's going to call into question a lot of what we do and why, what gets OCR'd, what doesn't. It just so happens that a lot of our collection is in English, but it's one of these things that we know we have to address, and we're gonna get to it, but we're not exactly sure when. Soon, I would think, and that'll be a huge project in and of itself, providing these transcripts, and it will happen. We're just not exactly sure when.
Anything else?
Really, do you have plans to address like international copyright issues? I know like 1923 is a pretty standard set date for U.S. copyright, but you must have some collections from China or from Europe.
Had a lot of discussions about it, and it's still being discussed.
The question was about copyright, and are we looking at basically non-U.S. copyright laws when we're making these determinations? And it has been a big discussion obviously for the Yale Center for British Art. I can let you speak more to that. The art gallery for now is just kind of sticking to U.S. law, but these campus committees we have may inform that differently.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great description. For the Center for British Art, we look at both because of our audience and our collection. But yes, we're all talking and trying to come up with, common routes for this.
Right. I mean, the whole copyright thing gets very tricky around that certain era of even that 23 date of, officially, copyright. You could get more into the 30s and be safe, but there's that range of did they register for copyright or not. But you have to then go and do the research to even look to say, is it there? And there starts to become a question of even some of these artists of Picasso or Gerald Murphy or things like that. How much is it worth your time to go in and do the research to prove that that object is now in the public domain, even though the artist died less than 70 years ago? Is it easier just to pay the Picasso Foundation their fee of $100 or whatever it is they want for you to use that image? Is that easier to do than the amount of research you have to do? And so I think you almost have to look at your own collection and start weighing it out. We have a couple of pieces in our collection that are represented by a foundation. The artist definitely died less than 70 years ago, but the creation of the object was, in that 23 era range, and we're actually, because we get so many requests for it and we want to use it because it's a very popular piece, we're starting to look to say it's probably worth us doing that research to look to say, can we try to prove that copyright was never registered for that, and therefore, if somebody comes up against us, we can say, well, our research shows it wasn't there. Prove to us that you have found somewhere where this is registered as under copyright. But that's why that 23 line is just, I don't want to say arbitrary, but it is kind of this line where you just have to make a decision of where is it at, and then some things you can squeak one way or the other. It depends on your own institution's comfort zone. And then at Yale, we've been trying to work with general counsel to get them to do it, and I think their comfort zone is hard to nail down as to what do they want, because there's so many variables of, oh, well, a lot of your collection's British, or a lot of your collection's this, so it's not a precise thing yet.
Yeah, and I was involved in a project actually very recently that involved Iranian material from the 1960s. And just as John described, we ended up not moving forward with the project because it would have been more work to try and figure it out than the project actually merited, and we shied away from it because we don't have a copyright treaty with Iran. Given the current political climate, we're probably not going to get one anytime soon. And they were from the 60s, so it's sort of like the deadly three strikes. And so we just decided to move on.
That's pretty consistent with our experiences.
Yeah.
We'll keep in touch.
All right, any more? Yeah.
When you draw the 1923 line, if you realize that an artist has died less than 70 years, do you go back, or is there a way in your system to catch that?
Yeah, we have. I mean, we're partly at the art gallery. As I said, we ran an automatic script that just looked at the creation date of the object and said if you were pre-23, flip this object rights type to public domain, otherwise leave it as not assigned until we could do the research. We're looking at now the question of, do we go back and kind of rerun another search to say look for everything that's public domain, but the artist's death date is more than or less than 70 years, so that we could troll through that number, create an object package and troll through those and look to say where's our comfort zone on those, or should we just flip them all back. We're kind of, the gallery is a little more cowboy style in how we work, partly with our director, who's a great director, but is more like, let's just do it. Our method right now really is more, we have comfort in what we're doing with that. We feel like we're not pushing huge TIFF files out that people are going to grab and do horrible things with. We're pushing maximum of, say, a 20 megabyte TIFF, which people could do stuff with, but nothing overly horrible. If somebody came to us and said, what's that?
Have you gotten pushback, or have people?
We have not. We have not had a takedown notice in that sense. As I noted, the website I showed you from the art gallery was supposed to launch a couple of weeks ago, and because of the hurricane, that kind of slowed things down because the main person doing the coding was in the path of the hurricane. But currently, our online collection does push up to 700 pixel images out, which you could right-click and, do evil harm with a 700 pixel image. But we did have an artist organization get in touch with us who said, we don't show that we have any permissions contracts with you. You're showing bigger images than we think. We fired back and said, we think this is fair use. We're doing a service. These aren't large images. And they said, but they're larger than thumbnail. That organization wouldn't identify what they were defining as a thumbnail. So we kind of have been in this back and forth to where we finally went back to that organization and said, we're in the middle of getting ready to launch this new website where we will only push out AAMD thumbnails. Can you just let us work towards that path? And currently that's the situation we're in with them right now. But otherwise we haven't gotten anybody asking for takedowns. But if we did, similarly, our system is if we got that takedown, we would flip the switch within TMS, which would trigger the dam. So within 24 to 48 hours, it would come back off. And most people, we had one other artist get in touch with us who didn't like an image we had up because it was an ID image. The art gallery also shows just simple ID images. So the painting happened to be leaning against the wall. So it was kind of not the most attractive, but it showed you what the object was. But admittedly, it wasn't a great image. But the artist really kind of took issue with that and said, I'd rather you take that image down until you can put a quality, what they considered a quality image up. So in that case, we went in and took the image down almost immediately. Just went to the back end and sucked it off and said, that's it until we reshoot it. So we definitely, with, particularly with copyright, really respect that that's out there, and we need to address it where we can. All right. What?
ID images then? They're not like...
The art gallery is different a little bit than the British Art Center. I'll speak for you, I think, but the British Art Center decided only to put really quality, I'll call it quality images up. The art gallery's decision was any image we had, if this glass is in the collection and it's sitting on the collector's table and I took a shot like this with all these cables, because that identifies it, that's being pushed up to the website. Because the thought on our end was we'd rather make it available. Now somebody may look and say, I love that cup, but God, it's a horrible image. Can you reshoot it? Well, then that object gets brought in the studio, it gets proper studio photography, and it's pushed out and replaces that ID image. So now we have a studio level image in there versus ID. But this is a decision the art gallery made. And the tools with TMS and with the DAM allow us to flip that switch on or off. So if a curator looks and says, in our system it's fine that as a curator I can see this in the building, but I don't want the public to see that, we flip the switch, and it doesn't push out to the content delivery service. Or if it was already pushing out there, it gets a signal on that night, it talks and says, oh, something changed, now I've got to take that image back down.
And the nice thing is we can control on the object side and the image side. We don't show ID shots, but one of the decisions we made with our website was to show multiple shots, including conservation, recto verso, unframed, things with color bars. So our primary image is the beauty crop, but you'll often see a range of other things there.
Right.
So they're they're there for people who may be interested to see what does the work look like unframed, what are the labels on the back. So we put those up when we can.
Right, and similarly, the art gallery made the decision not to put conservation state images up because we felt like the curators felt like out of context that could be confusing to see a raking light image or something that somebody may grab that and not really know what they're grabbing. So it's not that we're opposed to sharing that image, but we need to make sure that it's contextualized, in there. So we're only putting, either these ID shots that are, mixed bag type things, or, proper studio photography images up. We don't share online the conservation images.
Do you mark the ID images as such, so when I know that it's outside of the quality, that it's an ID image versus...
It would be painfully off. I could pull the website up, but yeah, it would, it's, when we have an ID shot, it's truly often, on, the packing room table that the registrar took just to kind of get a basic image shot of that. So we have everything from that to these rapid image files, which are good quality images, properly framed and such, but the color may not be as precise as those that came in the studio and were really hand treated. So the gallery runs that range just because we felt that was a better service to our constituents. Over time those ID images will get replaced with studio level or rapid level images.
And we actually differentiate on our website. We mark what are our high-res, as John says, high-res boutique quality images, and our rapid imaging sort of more mass-produced images, and that's actually marked very clearly which it is, so that if you need a high-res beauty shot for your publication, you'll know looking at it whether or not that file exists, or whether you need to request that the high-res, really nice image be created. Although looking at them side by side, and I know this is the case for all of us, looking at rapid imaging or high-res images side by side, it's pretty tough to tell which is which. They're right. All at a really high level.
Through pains to try to make them good quality.
Yeah, everything's at a really high level of quality.
All right, well, it's noon. We thank everybody for coming. If you have more questions, get in touch with us. Thank you.